Okay, kia ora, everybody. If you are watching this, it means you are about to start the level 1 static image task that is worth 3 credits. This particular PowerPoint does not go through what is required of the task. That is a different video that you have access to, a different recording, a different PowerPoint. This PowerPoint and this recording is going to take you through a range of exemplars, so examples of past static images and the grades they receive and why. So what does achieved, merit and excellence look like for level 1 static image? So this is going to detail, this is what the example looks like, this is why it is the grade that it is. So this first example is an achieved. So just take a moment to take a look at the example before we go through the details. Okay, so this particular static image is based on the poem Nothing's Changed by Tatamkulu Africa, who some of you will have studied, some of you won't have. That poem is about the problems with apartheid and how the laws around apartheid were changed, but people's attitudes didn't change. That's what the poem is about. So this piece is an achieved. It meets the standard because the idea is clearly shown in this image. So on the left-hand side, you can see I've written here the idea that things may be friendly on the surface, but inside there is still negativity or hate or evil. That is being clearly communicated to the audience, so the people looking at the image. So it achieves on that level in its communication of an idea. We know that symbolism is really important in static image. So this particular person has used color to be symbolic. So they have, the dark colors here and over here with the light colors. So there's a contrast, okay, with negativity and positivity. So the good and the bad, okay. There's also a symbol of a demonic face here being used. Now that's a symbol because there's no mention of the devil in Nothing's Changed, but this particular symbol is representing evil or negativity or bad thoughts. Now, we know the quote is important, so the quote over here, that fits the image well. No board says it, but we know where we belong. That really fits the image because it's talking about how there may be ideas that are thought of but not spoken about. So no board says it. It's not written anywhere, maybe friendly on the surface, but we know where we belong. We know how people feel about us. So that's the people suffering from the racism due to apartheid. For merit, if this person was wanting to get to merit, this is what would need to be done with this image. The quote needs to be placed on the paper with more thought. It's just sort of randomly stuck off to the side there. I don't see any real reason why it's there. So there needs to be a reason why the quote is where it is. It's a good quote, but it's not placed perfectly. There needs to be more symbolism integrated. So there is this contrast of the devil's head, which is like underneath how these people are thinking. So that is good symbolism, but it's not really enough to show developed use of symbolism, to be convincing. Okay, so there's some, but there's not a lot. So that's the first example. That is an achieved. This example here is also an achieved. It meets the standard. I'll give you a minute to take a look. Okay, so this image is based on the poem A Negro Speaks of Rivers by Langston Hughes, which details how African American people have been through many struggles in their history, but have ultimately come out stronger and determined and hopeful. That's what the poem is about. Some of you may have studied it this year. Now, this isn't achieved because the idea is clearly communicated. There's a strength of cultural roots, so people's roots in their culture are allowing the tree to stand against the wind or attack. Okay, so the deep roots that have grown all the way down are helping the tree stand tall, helping the people stand tall. So it's very symbolic, which is important for static image. So let's unpack those symbols a little bit more. The quote is placed with a little bit more thought than the previous example. So, my soul has grown deep like the rivers. Okay, so deep is placed under the tree to imply that the roots are going deep, and the word rivers is along the river, so it's more thoughtfully placed than the previous example. There's a reason why it's there. And there's a lot of symbolism going on here. So the tree is representing the African American culture, the people standing strong. Okay? The roots down the bottom of the page are representing the history and the ancestry that has grown and developed over time. The wind here, which is represented with these squiggly lines, that's representing the challenges that are hitting the tree, the African American people, but it's still standing strong. And the roots and the river running alongside each other here represents the idea that the rivers run deep, meaning that the culture runs deep. So my soul has grown deep like the rivers. The quote ties in nicely with the message that the culture is deep and strong and helping the African American people stay strong. So there's a lot of symbolism going on in this image. For merit, if this person wanted to be convincing with control, there needs to be more control of the space needed. Up the top here, there's a lot of empty space which isn't being utilised. It doesn't seem that there's any clear purpose to that empty space. So that seems less controlled than we would like for a merit. And it's a little bit cartoony. It's a little bit childlike, which doesn't have to be an issue. But if it was a more serious tone, it would reflect what the image is trying to convey. So if you're dealing with serious topics, it makes sense to use professional looking images to present that idea. So this is our next example, and this is a merit. This is a merit example. So I'll give you a moment to take a look. Okay, so this example is also based on the poem A Negro Speaks of Rivers by Langston Hughes. It's been a popular text. Now this is a merit because, similar to the previous image, the idea is clear. Okay, so the idea in this image is that the time of oppression is ending for the African American people, and their overcoming of these challenges has given them strength. So they are gaining strength from overcoming these challenges, and these terrible times are ending. That's the message that's being portrayed, and it's clear. There's a seriousness and some drama to this image that the previous one didn't have. Not necessarily because it's been constructed digitally, but because there's more drama and choice in the colours. They're quite intense. The sun, for example, the sun down here, for example, is quite striking, which is important for a merit to show control of the techniques of the visual language. And there's a lot of symbolism going on in this one again, and they're layered, which is different to the previous image. So I'm going to explain that. So we have the sunset happening here, which represents time ending. The sun is setting on this particular time, so that's symbolic. The river along the side here is very large to represent strength. So large rivers are very powerful and very permanent. So it represents the strength of the people. The images that are in the river are representative of things that have been overcome by African American people. So, for example, the chains representing imprisonment or slavery, this colored sign representing segregation in America, the lack of justice for African American people, the lack of equal wages. All of these things are symbolized in the river, and they're in the river, they're building the culture, the strength is coming from those hardships, okay, similar to that previous image. And also the figure on the left-hand side here is kneeling, and if you can see, they're focusing on the sunset. They're looking towards the sunset. They're not focusing on the negative things that are in the river. They're looking towards the sunset, the positive, not focusing on the past. They're looking towards the future. So can you see how there's a lot of different elements working together to create the message? Things are more what we call integrated together. The quote as well fits really nicely with the idea of the image, my soul has grown deep like the rivers. And there's an interesting choice here of the quote being curved like this. It almost suggests a personal thought or an inner thought, which could be from this figure here, thinking about the future and considering all of the past and how we can grow from that. So everything in that image is placed for a specific purpose. That's what makes it a merit. There's more thought in what has gone where and how everything relates to the other parts of the image. That's why it's a merit. If this person wanted to achieve excellence, the symbols in the river could be placed a little bit more thoughtfully or integrated a little bit more. They're a little bit random and just sort of placed there. So that would require some more thought. And the color of the river, this brownish reddish color, is not clear to me why the person has chosen to present it in that way. So that holds it back from being perceptive and commanding attention for an excellence, because I can't quite see the reason behind everything that's on the page. So that's why that's a merit. This example is an excellence, and I'll give you a moment to take a look and think why this is better than the previous examples. Okay, so this excellent example is based on the novel Noughts and Crosses by Mallory Blackman, which deals with racism in a dystopian world where people who are of black skin in the United States of America are in control, and it's the white skinned people who have a lot of racism directed towards them and don't have equality. So it sort of flips that on its head. Now, this image has a very clear idea. It takes a little bit longer to read or to understand than the previous images, but this idea is more sophisticated. So the idea that there is an unknown force dictating what happens to people based on the color of their skin. There can be an illusion of choice, but really choices are made for people based on their skin color. So people don't have choice. They think they do, but they really don't. Now, that's a more sophisticated idea than the previous examples. It's more mature, it's more thought out. Okay? So that can be the difference between a merit and an excellence, is the level of maturity and thought in the idea itself that the image is portraying. And there are multiple symbols being used to create complex images here. So this is what sets this one apart from the previous example. So for example, the black figure here representing the black community that are in charge in Noughts and Crosses, they are wearing a mask, which means they are faceless. Their identity is hidden. They are blindfolded, which implies they're not looking and they're not taking responsibility for what they're doing. They are pointing, so they are dictating what people are doing. There's a knife, a bloody knife behind their back, which implies that they are responsible, but they're keeping it secret. So just in that one image, there's so many symbols working together to send this message that there is an overarching figure or part of society that is dictating what people are doing, but not taking responsibility for it, not acknowledging that that is the problem. Okay? So that's the first part of the idea. There's an unknown force dictating what happens to people. The quote is clearly relevant. Every aspect of my life lay in the hands of others. That's incredibly clear. Okay? Absolutely incredibly clear for the particular image. And there's so much going on here. There's the symbol of the road here, which implies a journey or travel, and the split in the road implies that there is a choice. You can go one way or the other way, but there's a barrier in the way. So there's the illusion of choice. It looks like these figures, these people, are able to choose which way they go, but they can't really. And even if they do, the splattering of what looks like blood implies that there's the danger there. And so they only have one way to go, and that's to a very negative consequence, either death or something terrible for them. Okay? So, and the difference in color, these figures are white, which relates to the text itself, how the white-skinned people are the ones being repressed in this novel. So it's so clear what this image is trying to tell me, and there's so many symbols working together. Okay? It's quite clever the way this person has done it. Every aspect of my life lay in the hands of others. However, excellence doesn't mean perfect. So to gain an excellence for the standard, and for any standard, things don't have to be perfect, they just need to meet the criteria. So what I mean by that is that there is some blank space in this image. So you shouldn't think, I can't have any blank space. That's not true. But this blank space doesn't draw away from the meaning of the image. I'm not thinking, oh, why is that blank? Why is something not behind there? I'm too transfixed in the road and the image of the policeman with the blindfold. So there's blank space, but it's not taking away from the impact of the image. Also, I do wonder why the quote is put where it is. So this part of the quote and then this part of the quote. It nicely balances the page, but I can't really see a specific reason why it would be there. But that's okay. Again, that's not taking away from the image. The quote is well chosen, and that's important. So finally, this is our last exemplar, which is an excellence. I'll give you a moment to take a look. Okay, this static image is based on the poem Sad Joke on a Marae by Apirana Taylor, who some of you will have studied. And this poem is about a Māori man returning to a marae that we don't know if he knows or not, and he can't communicate with his ancestors. He's lost his connection to his culture. He doesn't speak te reo. He can't speak to his ancestors. Now, this idea is crystal clear. It's illustrating how the loss of connection to language can cut off a person's connection to their history or their mana or their culture or their identity, any one of those that all tie in together. It is very clear. I can read it straight away, and it's quite striking. And what I mean by striking is that I look at it and I want to keep looking at it. It grabs my attention. Excellence, static images need to grab our attention. And there's many things, many symbols that are going on in this image that all help communicate that one idea. So for example, the broken string here, this person has used real string and glued it on. So the broken string implying that there's a break between the head and the heart as to what they feel and what they know. Okay, so too in the poem, wants to speak his language. It's in his heart. He wants to connect, but in his head, he doesn't have that cultural knowledge that he needs to do that. So there's a disconnect between what he wants and what he knows. The quote, "Tihe mori ora," for "that's all I knew," "Tihe mori ora" is what Tu continues to say in the poem. It's the only Māori he knows, as we can see in the second part of the quote, for "that's all I knew." And that's placed across where somebody's mouth would be, implying that that's the only thing he can speak, and it's almost like a barrier, something across his mouth that stops him from speaking, for "that's all I knew." And you can't quite see in this copy, but down inside the heart, those are torn up pieces of a mihi in te reo. So a speech that introduces who you are in te reo, that's all been torn up. And even there are small parts that have been scribbled out, as in he doesn't know this part, he doesn't know this part, he has empty space. So that's incredibly clever, and really illustrates the idea that that's what's in his heart, but the connection isn't there because of his lack of language. And the symbolism is very developed, meaning it's all interwoven and everything relates to the next aspect, and it's all purposeful. Everything is on that page for a reason, and I know that because I can read it and I can look at every piece and say, this is what that means, this is what that means, this is what that means. Now, this is a really great example for you because you don't have to overcrowd your image. You can see there's space back here, okay? Which is absolutely fine. That doesn't take away from the image, it adds to it because it makes that silhouette of the person stand out. So a few well-chosen symbols are far more effective than lots and lots and lots of little symbols. So think very carefully about the symbols that you're using and how you can tie them together. And also, this is a great example because, as I said, everything is there for a purpose. Nothing is randomly placed on that page. I can see exactly why this person has put the quote there, has untied the string there. It's all there for a purpose.